Hello and welcome to Jump To It for IrishRacing.com and Betting Expert. I'm Shane Anderson. On today's show, we've got a lot to cover because the build-up to the great classic races at Epsom, the Oaks and the Derby, still is moving along. We've got plenty to talk about regarding some of the key chances. We've got the news of the week, some Derby contenders. We're also going to focus on the meeting coming up at Haydock in the UK on Saturday with a couple of group races and, of course, the all-important tips of the week. So welcome in the team. It's great to have Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley with me. Guys, good to catch up once again. It's amazing this build-up to some of the big classic races, Stephen. We're seeing horses really step out now through their trials. We've had some good racecourse gallops at Epsom this week. There's a lot to focus on.
Yeah, it's an exciting time of year, Shane, isn't it? All these top horses from the best yards coming out. We had the gallops at Epsom Racecourse, but that did come on soft ground. And quite what that's told us is open to doubt. They walked around for most of it, but at least they've had a look at the track. The betting is starting to hot up as well. We've got Royal Ascot only a few weeks away, and of course the news that 12,000 people are going to be allowed in, which is great. And things do feel like they're moving in the right direction generally.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that coming up as Ed quickly joins us. Good to catch up with you too, Ed, and great to see. We've actually got some sunshine in London at the moment. We might have some good conditions over the next few weeks.
Absolutely. We've got a load of sun over Cheltenham in a moment. It's a shame we didn't get that in March because about 95% of my Antepost book needed the ground like an absolute road. But no, it's great. Yeah, the sun's out. Look at long-range forecast ahead into next week with the Oaks and the Derby. Temperatures up to 23, 24, the mid-70s as it'd be in Australia and in America. So, yeah, weather's looking good. As Stephen says, people starting to get back on the race courses. There's a general vibe of positivity about the racing scene at the moment.
All right, guys, let's get into the news of the week. And the first area to focus on, of course, was last weekend, where in Ireland we had the running of the 1,000 and 2,000 Guineas, the classic races for the 3-year-olds. And Stephen, I thought in the 2,000 Guineas, it was tremendous to see Jim Bolger go 1-2 in the race, because importantly, McSweeney, who won the 2,000 Guineas, was a Group 1 winner of last season as a 2-year-old. He looks to have come back in terrific order.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good performance, Shane, actually. He was up on a hammer throughout, a really strong pace, and was taken on early in the straight, but kept pulling out more. I think that is very good form. I think, personally, that's probably the best Guineas of the two between Britain and Ireland. Of course, Ryan Moore, you wouldn't have wanted to be his cat last weekend because he got beaten in 2 photographs in both the big races, having looked sure to win on each occasion. So it just goes to show, actually, I was going to say with regard to Epsom, that the Ryan Moore horses, who he obviously gets the choice at Coolmore, but it's pretty meaningless, really. They're all doing their best, and the margins between them, even though people think just because a young lad's riding the 5th choice, they're all trying, they're all doing their best, and you can make a case for backing them because they're a much bigger price than the front of the market.
What did you make of Poetic Flare getting so close to McSweeney, though, Stephen? Poetic Flare has now contested all 3 of the major Guineas races in Europe. Of course, winning the UK 2,000 Guineas at Newmarket, then running quite well, although things didn't pan out for him at Paris Longchamp, and then, of course, going so close in the Irish version. Do you feel, as you said, he's probably producing the benchmark performance with McSweeney being able to knock him off?
Definitely, he's an extremely reliable and tough horse. What's amazing about him is he's run these 3 brilliant top-class races all within the space of about 3 weeks, which is really good to see. Punters like that. I mean, one of the things I can't stand about the flat, and is a negative about the flat generally, is that horses are wrapped in cotton wool. They have 2 or 3 runs, and then you never see them again the following season. Whereas Jim Bolger is a really good advert. He's a terrific trainer for punters to follow because he just runs his horses, and this one has run 3 cracking. I mean, I thought people said it was disappointing in France. I thought he ran well in France. It was a messy race. He got messed about at the wrong time and wasn't seen to best effect, but I did think his run in Ireland last weekend was top level form, and you can mark all the races around him.
Ed, give us your assessment of the race. McSweeney is now likely to press on to the Derby, a step up in trip. Poetic Flare, narrowly beaten, is likely to stay at a mile and go to the St James's Palace Stakes at Royal Ascot. Do you feel that they're the 2 leading contenders perhaps for those 2 classic races?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, Poetic Flare is remarkably consistent. Agree with a lot of what Stephen was saying. it was a messy race in France last night, got trapped behind a wall of horses on soft ground, but it's obviously got a really strong constitution because it's just managed to keep backing up those performances, and we'll go to Ascot over a mile of leading claims. Yeah, from the Irish 2000 Guineas, obviously Max Swinney's going up to the Derby. It sounds like Van Gogh is going to head to the Derby, and it sounds like Lucky Vega there might be sending up in trip as well. So I think the overall view of that is if Poetic Flair is going to be the miler, a lot of those that finished in the kind of leading spots in Irish 2000 Guineas, all connections have all voiced 10 furlongs and even a mile and a half going further forward. Just very quickly on Max Swinney, I think it was a very good ride by Rory Cleary. Just my concern with him going further forward would be ground conditions. All his best form has come on soft and heavy. With the Derby in mind, only a week away. If we're getting weather of 23, 24 degrees around Epsom all next week, it could be touching the word firm in a few places by then. So that would just be something, a note of caution. But I think it's a pretty strong race, and I do think we'll see a lot of those horses going up in trip sooner rather than later.
Stephen, in the Irish 1,000 Guineas for the fillies, we saw Empress Josephine finish the race off powerfully to get up and deny the stablemate in Joan of Arc. The thing that's impressed me about Empress Josephine is the natural improvement she seems to have made at every one of her starts. How do you assess her as a standout 3-year-old filly of her generation?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good performance. Come from miles back, park wide. She was under pressure quite early on before the straight, but picked up really strongly to nail her stablemate right on the line. This was one of those classic races, Shane, where I think Aidan had a handful of runners, and this one was the late springer. I think she was bigger than 20 for most of the day, but in the last 3 minutes before they went in the stall, she was hammered. I think she ended up about 12-1 and I thought it was a remarkable run to come and win. She's going to be one to stick with over the summer months as her stamina is drawn out. And the runner-up, well, I thought that one deserved extra credit as well because she was up on the hammer throughout, taken on, looked like she just about got it won and just got mugged by one flying on her outside. So I thought both races were strong form, and I suspect well worth following over the next few months.
What about your assessment, Ed, of the 1,000 Guineas?
A lot again. The up in trip angle will be the ones I'll be taking out of it. Empress Josephine, I think she won despite of the trip rather than because of it. I think the attritional conditions really tapped into the stamina reserves, which really suited. You know, she's a sister to Minding, who won the Oaks. Her future lies over middle distances for sure, has to be said. Quite interesting, Joan of Arc. I think Aidan O'Brien's actually mentioned he thinks that one will get a bit further as well. So there does seem to be this kind of theme to both the Irish Classics that a lot of horses have performed well in it. But I do think the extra stamina test, because of the real deep ground, has well, at least say it's made a lot of connections think we do need to run these individuals over further sooner rather than later. So Empress Josephine, impressive to win that. I expect even more from her as she steps up to 10 furlongs and beyond.
Really good point I think you raised there. Of course, the other Group 1 on the card was the Tattersalls Gold Cup, an upset result, marginal upset result with Helvic Dream denying Broome and also True Self, and probably a low standard renewal of that race. Guys, let's talk about Barney Curley, one of the great characters in UK racing. Of course, a trainer, but well-known massive punter. He could pull off some of the biggest plunges, Stephen. He sadly passed away aged 81 this past week, and there's been an extraordinary outpouring of emotion and a lot of tributes being laid towards him. Give me your assessment of Barney Curley.
Well, my memory of Barney Curley, I first started going racing in my 20s, Shane, when I should have been studying at university. And I used to go racing 3 or 4 times a week in the south. And Barney Curley then, this was in the 1990s, for those of us showing our age here, but Barney Curley was a regular at Folkestone, Ascot, Sandown, Kempton, all the tracks, Newbury that I went to. Whether he had a runner or not, he used to attend. And it's quite incredible how he has stood the test of time and evolved as a punter. It's something we can admire, because going back 30 odd years, he was dominating the rails. When he had a bet, there was absolute bedlam. I mean, I remember very well at Folkestone, which is now closed, but was a little gaff track down in Kent, down there. And Barney Curley, I think he had a run, it might have been Magic Combination or something like that. And the bookmakers, there's probably 10 bookmakers, all had staff in those days, and all 10 of them followed him round the ring, waiting to see what he would back on the rails. And the move then was for whatever he backed, they all wanted to be on private before they told their employer what he'd backed. So it was absolutely, the atmosphere when he was on the racecourse was fantastic. But what the point I'm trying to make is he moved on from that. He wasn't a cash punter on the rails. He laid out. He embraced the internet age more than anyone else. He's had these 3 or 4 significant coups where they've laid a group of horses out overnight, made sure the prices didn't contract, and then got on. I mean, he had murders on one occasion trying to get paid, but he really was a genius, a real thinker. And I think a lot of people sort of moan, well, they were non-tries, they were this, that, and the other. But he was a character, part and parcel of the game. And I would imagine he got so many people interested in racing as well.
Yeah, probably. I think you touched on a couple of good points there, Ed, as I bring you into the conversation. When you think of Barney Curley, it wasn't just about having the horse in the right race at the time. So, quite often you can see a good market move for a horse that looks well graded or well handicapped. He would map out these processes and plan out a campaign to actually pull off these desired betting results. He was quite remarkable in the way that he could pull it all together.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the racer game needs characters, doesn't it? And just the great thing, I think there's an actual quote from him that says, he actually says, even when I'm lying, I'm telling the truth, or when I'm telling the truth, I'm lying, for example. Like he would spin a million and different stories to you to make you believe what you want to believe. There's an actual is an interview of him where he says, never do multiples, the road to the poorhouse. And then like 3 days later, he's got this Yankee up for 9,000 to 1 or whatever. So he was just a brilliant character, a brilliant game, of course. In terms of his kind of on-screen persona, he's most known really for the big argument, if you like, with Luke Harvey and John McCurragh all those years ago, back in 2005, with a big bust-up to do a horse which was a massive drifter for him, which was tailed off. The game needs characters. He was a great character. I mean, later on in life, of course, he went on to do lots of charity work involved with Africa. He spent a lot of time over there and set up a lot of funds. And he said he got heavily involved in that in his latter years as well. So he was a great character. People want to poo-poo some of his exploits of, these horses weren't trying and when they were trying. But, at the end of the day, it was all part of the game for him. And, he will be sorely missed because, as I said, the game does need characters. And he definitely provided a lot of entertainment as well as a lot of shrewd knowledge.
Yeah, I think he was very much a child of his time. I mean, it was a vastly different world when he was at the peak of his powers, and also being able to pull off a lot of those plunges. The world is different now, and there are far more, shall we say, stricter and more stringent integrity services attached to racing to try and level those edges out that perhaps quite often trainers would be able to do in the past. But we certainly wish his family the very best, with Barney Curley sadly passing away. Guys, let's talk about Classic Getaway. Now, this was a very impressive performance, Stephen, by a horse that cost an absolute bundle going through the sale ring. Is now likely to be one of the favourite for potentially quite a few races at the Cheltenham Festival next season.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to be talking about this now. I think it was about £500,000 or something. I mean, the sums involved now are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, these horses are running for £3,000 prize money if they win, and people are paying, 200 times that to buy them. I mean, it does seem madness, really. But obviously, top stable. They know the time of day. There was fortunes for it. I think he went off 7 or 4 on his debut. Didn't come off the bridle to cruise clear. I mean, no one knows what the form's worth, but rest assured, Mullins will know what the form's worth because he'll know exactly how good he is at home. They'll have worked him with all their horses. I did hear, and I think Ed touched on this, that he's going to touch on this rather, that he might go straight over hurdles rather than the champion bumper. So I wouldn't be rushing to be backing him for anything at Cheltenham just yet.
Ed, good lead in there from Stephen. When you think about Classic Getaway going towards the Cheltenham Festival, there are options aplenty for him. You love a long-range punt. What would you do in this scenario? What type of bet would you like to put on, or is it way too early for a horse like him?
I'd say it's neither of those 2 points, actually, Shane. I think it's just the big alarm bells of where he actually will end up would be the pressing question here. I mean, absolutely crackers, really, when you think about it. This horse was already 10 to 1 Antepost favourite for the champion bumper without even having run under rules. He was purchased for $570,000 by Cheveley Park Stud. I mean, the Cheveley Park colours are becoming just synonymous with winning. I mean, I can't believe the strike rate they've got at the moment with their top horses. They just seem to absolutely be nailing it in the National Hunt sphere. They've paid a fortune for this horse. He's come out. What's really interesting is it was a 2.5 mile bumper, which is a bit unusual, that type of trip. There's not many of them in Ireland. It was very deep ground. He won he looked better the further he went. It was really interesting, the insight of Patrick Mullins afterwards, saying he really asked him to stride out in the closing stages, because I get the feeling they think he's clearly got a huge engine. He's a previous point-to-point winner, but I actually think they think he's a little bit slower than they were hoping. And I don't think he's going to have the zip for a 2-mile champion bumper. And I think that's pretty much what they were insinuating afterwards. And that they put out that kind of disclaimer of that. I think they might throw him over hurdles sooner rather than later. All in all, he's going to be a proper old-fashioned staying chaser in 2 to 3 years' time. That's the long game with him. So my overall picture of him is he's clearly a horse of a huge engine, as you would hope for £570,000. But a word of warning: I wouldn't be rushing to stick him in some Antepost multiples for the champion bumper. If he ends up in a 2.5 mile, 3 mile hurdle this side of Christmas, wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world, and they may end up looking at something like the Albert Bartlett in the long term. But an exciting horse. Very rare to get a horse of that calibre and potential running at Tipperary on a weekday evening in May, it has to be said. But yeah, definitely one to keep in your notebooks over the summer months, because I'm sure we'll see him in a top graded hurdle race in the winter.
Yeah, I think you make some really good points there. And of course, he's also a hype horse, so he probably ends up being shorter in the market than probably what his true price should be. Let's talk about Royal Ascot, Stephen. You touched on this in our introduction. Some great news now as we're seeing more and more sports being able to embrace fans. But arguably the biggest flat meeting of the year will now have 12,000 fans on course in attendance for each of the 5 days.
Yeah, this is very welcome, Shane. 12, I think it's 12,000, isn't it? It was 10, now it's 12. So it's going to be part of the trials that so far have all been going really well. It does make a difference. I mean, Ascot, I'm not sure, have you been since it was rebuilt? I mean, I remember the old Ascot used to be a terrific atmosphere. And again, I'm showing my age here. But the new Ascot, in inverted commas, is basically Heathrow Terminal 4. You go there midweek, you've got to walk half a mile to find anyone else. I mean, as Royal Ascot with 12,000 people is actually going to be virtually empty, and they'll all be parked up in the corporate boxes. So whether there's any great atmosphere, at least it's a step in the right direction. We're getting crowds back on race, because I know a lot of my bookmaker friends have been screaming the place down because their numbers have been severely limited. I mean, if you've bought a pitch at Ascot for 50 grand and you're on pitch number 25 and you're not allowed to go and bet, I mean, you're absolutely fuming. And this has been going on for 18 months. So it is quite serious. It's a lot of people's livelihood. So we need to get back to normal. Let's hope it all carries on in the right direction.
Ed, I used to always try and wrangle a working holiday from Australia to get to Royal Ascot each and every year. But of course, since I've moved to Europe, COVID's hit and we've had no one there last year. But I think, as Stephen touches on, it's super important because we are talking about people's livelihoods, not only from a bookmaker perspective, but for those who work in the venue themselves. And added on to that, racing needs fans cheering on the champions of the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a step back in the right direction. Ascot, there's a few courses I would say really lend to doing upping the numbers of people in attendance during COVID times. Like Newbury's another one you can go to. Is very spaced out. Ascot has got a very spaced out feel, but it's good. It's all positive news. And the feedback, I mean, I haven't been on a race course since Gold Cup Day of Cheltenham, 18 months ago. But from people I've, heard in the industry who've been on courses, say the COVID protocols are so well done. A lot of race courses are really adhered to them. Everything's so well regulated in that sense. I don't see any kind of negative downside to this or any repercussions. 12,000 for the biggest flat meeting in a year. It's in these times, you've got a bit of perspective is needed, and I think it's just excellent news. And hopefully by Ascot 2022, it's back to full throttle. But looking forward to it. It'll be great action nonetheless.
All right, guys, let's look at the news of the week. Let's have a look at now some of the important upcoming races. Going to spend a bit of time today focusing on the classic championship races coming up from Epsom in just over a week's time. Of course, we've got the Oaks on the Saturday into the Derby the Oaks on the Friday into the Derby on the Saturday. We'll start with the Oaks contenders, guys, and Santa Barbara is certainly the one that's really captured the imagination of quite a lot of people. It's one of the favoured runners of the race, trained, of course, by the legend Aidan O'Brien. Let's hear the thoughts of the master trainer about Santa Barbara.
Yeah, she always was very special in her work. Obviously it was a big risk going to the Guineas with only her second run, but ran very well. and this was always penciled in to be her second run. She came out of the Guineas well. Everything went well with her sense, and obviously she's never been over that far before, but she's a Camelot filly, and we're really looking forward to seeing her run.
You say it's a risk running a filly like that second time out in a classic. How can you tell that she's come out of it well?
Yeah, no, mentally and physically obviously are the two things, but physically she's been very good, didn't lose much weight, and mentally has been very relaxed, so they were the two big things that you want to see. Obviously it's a risk going into a classic with only a second run, a very easy run on softish ground at the Curragh, going to Newmarket on fast ground, so we were really delighted with the way she did come out of it, really.
Great to hear from Aidan O'Brien there, Stephen. As we talk Santa Barbara, she comes into the race as a favourite. She comes into the race with only 2 career starts under her belt, both over a mile. Is she a false favourite, or is she the one that we should really be looking at the race around?
I think you've got to look at the race around her. I suspect she's far too short, Shane, isn't she? I mean, she lost a lot of ground in the dip at Newmarket, or not necessarily a lot of ground, but momentum. She changed her legs, I think, and was all at sea, and then picked up again late. I mean, she's trained by a genius, 2 runs. I mean, to be honest, at Epsom, I'm not rushing to play at short prices, full stop. The place is a roller coaster minefield. You're probably 5-2 to get a clean run through, let alone anything else has got to go in your favour. So I couldn't dream of backing her. I can totally understand why she's favourite, but I think you're probably better off looking elsewhere for the winner.
Ed, what are your assessments of her going into the race? Is she one that you want to side with, or can we bet against her and get some decent value?
I'd absolutely be against her purely on price grounds. I mean, 15-8 to win the Oaks. You look at the facts, not the hype, and all the stopwatch celebrities and what they tell you. You know, she's a maiden winner who's unplaced in a Group 1 over a mile. That's the facts of it. Now, yes, she may well improve 12 furlongs, and in fact she will do, and through maturity and time. But just wouldn't be getting stuck in at 15-8. I mean, my general overall view of the picture is I think the Colt, the Derby picture is looking very strong towards those at the head of the market. I think we've got some very good individuals. I personally think this Oaks at the moment is wide open. I think there's fillies in here totally unexposed who've had 1 or 2 runs. You could see tons of improvement coming from them. They're all trading it around double-figure prices. So purely on price grounds, Santa Barbara could easily win this, and she may improve, which she'll need to do. But I'm sure you could find a better 15-8 shots in a Foss bumper, to be honest with you, than you could in the Oaks, personally. So it's not for me, purely on price grounds.
Yeah, I tend to agree with both of you. And I thought she didn't look too straightforward at Newmarket down the dip, as Stephen touched on. So what's she going to be like around the uphill down dales of Epsom in the Oaks? Let's talk about Ziada, trained by Roger Varian. Looks very, very impressive. And there's certainly been a bit of a push for her, Stephen, through some market moves in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I was told she was stable nap before Chester, Shane, but she was involved in a tactical race there and finished second behind Dubai Fountain in the Cheshire Oaks. Whether that form is really Group 1 standard is debatable, but she'll improve. She'll definitely stay. Roger Varian's flying. I actually like the other one of Roger Varian's, Shane, called Tiona, who ran in the Musidora again at York on the Dante meeting. And I thought she ran a remarkable race. She was well beaten behind Snowfall, but if you watch the run back, she fluffed the start. She pulled very hard for nearly 3/4 of the race, and I thought it was quite a remarkable run. If she settles at Epsom, I think she'll go extremely close. I also don't fancy, we're talking about horses at a bad price. Snowfall, who actually won the Musidora, I think she's around about a 4-1 chance for the Epsom Oaks. Well, not for me at all. She has had a lot of runs. She was gifted 3 or 4 lengths walking pace with everything briefing and tugging in behind her in the Musidora. She's, I really, really don't fancy her. I think she'll be a big drifter on the day, and I'll be looking to oppose her win and place. So at the moment, I like Tiona, but I do agree with Ed. It's a sort of race, putting my bookmaker hat back on. If you can lay 2-1, maybe 2-1 and 5-1, say Snowfall, well, that's even money coupled, the front two. You'd be going down the book, as we used to say.
All right, Ed, your views on Ziada, Roger Varian's filly. She's won 3 of her 4 starts. In fact, all of her 4 runs have been very good. Can she make the next step and become an Oaks champion?
Potentially. I mean, there were enough excuses for her, weren't there, at Chester? Excuse me. You watched that race back. I mean, the official note to the stewards were essentially she got no room, couldn't get a run. She got caught in the heels of one of the fillies in front of her. It was a messy contest. It was very deep ground when she won at the back end of last season, and I just wonder if she does have a little bit of a knee action on her. That'd be a slight concern of me with dry and weather. Clearly an exciting prospect. I think the trip will be fine. I personally, just my own opinion, I think there's others in here at bigger prices with a bit more potential and a bit more excitement. And Tiona being one of those who got very upset, very restless before the start of the Musadora. And, in the stall, she was very fractious. And I think she expended a lot of energy early on, shall we say. And despite that, still ran pretty well. So, not for me personally at the prices again with Ziada. I'm looking at bigger ones.
Next, also want to talk about, guys, it's Saffron Beach, trained by Jane Chapelheim. She's very promising, this filly, Stephen, of course, winning both of her starts over 7 furlongs as a 2-year-old. She's been runner-up at her 2 starts over this campaign so far, including the 1,000 guineas at Newmarket. Do you consider her to be a live Oaks contender?
Well, I backed her in the 1,000 guineas, and I thought she ran really, really well. Jane Chapelheim does particularly well with a small team of horses without the patronage of some of the bigger names in Newmarket. I really like Saffron Beach, but I just don't see her being a 1 mile 4 furlong filly at all. I think she's got a lot of speed. I mean, I was actually thinking they might drop her back in trip from a mile back to 7, to be honest. So talk of her for the Oaks, I find it hard. I mean, drying ground would help, which is definitely going to be. Ed just touched on that. I think it'll be fast ground by next Saturday. We just looked at the weather forecast here, and it's 25 degrees for most of next week. And I live about 20 minutes from Epsom, so it's going to be good ground by the weekend, let alone next weekend. So that'll help her. But I would have a huge stamina question mark about Saffron Beach personally.
Good point, because Ed, Saffron Beach at one stage was being talked about as progressing straight to the Irish 1,000 guineas after her run at Newmarket, but now they've deviated back and going towards the Oaks. Do you have her as perhaps a question mark stayer?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the old petrol gauge would be coming into question there. I mean, look, I admire connections. I'm having a go at it. We often talk about wrapping some of these individuals on cotton wool, both on the flat and on the jumps. Look, there's only one Oaks. Let's have a go. She doesn't stay. So what? I think 10 furlongs, I think, could easily. Her running style suggests maybe 10 furlongs would be within her compass, but I just think 1.5 miles at Epsom, even allowing for good ground, I've got doubts about her stamina, and the pedigree is a little bit inconclusive as well. So, not for me personally.
Well, Jane Chapelheim, of course, being Australian, I'll have to cheer for her in the Oaks anyway. Let's hope she does well. Let's talk about Ocean Road, who was a filly that I quite liked going into the trial at Lingfield. Daughter of Australia, Stephen, who... Well, she bombed the start, never really could get into the race, but I thought she hit the line quite well. Before I get your views, let's hear from the trainer, Hugo Palmer, about her chances going towards the Oaks.
So, Hugo, Oisin's just got off Ocean Road, who's just done a mile at Epsom. How happy were you with her?
Yeah, I was very happy. I mean, unless Oisin came and told you something he didn't tell me, principally it's about how happy Oisin was, and he seemed really happy. So he's the man on board. He'll be the man on board on Oaks Day. And I think that was the important thing about her coming here and working nicely today, is that hopefully she could just, show him how much she's improved since Lingfield and give him some confidence.
And Oisin mentioned that she's a very uncomplicated filly. What's she like to train?
She's probably a little bit more complicated to train than she is to ride. She's quite sharp, and she's ridden by Yasmin Bowie, who's one of my best riders, been with me a long time, and rode Powerful Breeze every day, and many other good fillies as well. She's not a sort of a child's ride at all, and a little bit on her toes at home, but touch wood, she's been sound and quite easy to train in that respect. So. Just a question of keeping her as well and healthy as she is now for a week on Friday.
And she's only had 3 runs. Is it fair to say she's likely to have a bit more improvement to come?
Yeah, improvements is a funny thing, because I remember when Covert Love, it was in our yard, she went from winning a median auction at Chelmsford to winning an Irish Classic in the space of 9 weeks, but barely galloped in between at home. So these lightly raced fillies, I think particularly 3-year-old fillies, can suddenly improve with the weather, and they blossom, and there's no particular rhyme or reason. You just have to enjoy it when it happens.
And you've obviously trained an Irish Oaks winner. You've also had an Oaks second. I can't help but draw similarities between the two. Both were placed at Nottingham, both won the Maidens, and both were placed in the Oaks trial. How similar do you think they could be?
It's hard, the racing program is the same every year, and you're training the same breed of horse every year, and so you're trying to emulate the great successes that other people have had and the successes that you've had yourself, and so you're trying to do the same thing. You can't reinvent the wheel. Nottingham's a nice track. It's not far from Newmarket. Lingfield is similar to Epsom. I think it's you find out there whether or not they're going to come down a hill a little bit. Find out more today. Of course there are similarities, and there will be similarities at this stage with lots of other fillies that haven't made it to Epsom that I've had as well. So I've always if you've got a nicely bred filly, once she's won a maiden, you want to try and find that black type, and there's plenty of it for middle distance fillies in May. But we feel we've done enough to be a lively outsider at Epsom. So,
and what are her ideal conditions? It was soft today, but what do you ideally have for Epsom?
She's only had 3 starts, and we don't tend to work them on heavy ground at home. That's the softest ground she's handled, and she's handled it very well. But as I said, the work was set up for her to handle it and for her to go well. And I can't believe watching the way she moves and how light she is on her feet. I can't believe she wouldn't be better on better ground. And I think, looking at the forecast, it's virtually heavy ground today. I think Andrew Cooper's in a lucky position. He can just let it improve all the way. Doesn't have to get his watering can out. Save the jockey club some money. It'll be lovely ground at Epsom next weekend.
Great to get that insight there from Hugo Palmer, courtesy of the team at JSC Communications. Stephen, look, I think she's a really live each-way prospect going towards the Oaks, because I think she's going to be one of the strongest at the end of the race. What's your assessment?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, Shay. I think she's about 40 or 50 to 1 on the exchanges at the moment, so she's a big price for a proven stayer. I mean, you'd have to be slightly worried about the track. She didn't particularly handle the downhill bit at Lingfield before staying on strongly. I mean, that form's probably modest in the grand scheme of things, but as you say, she'll definitely stay the trip, and that's not something you can say about all of the front of the market, basically. So 40 to 1. I really liked her debut run. She was a massive eye catcher behind Noon Star at Nottingham, who's a very nice filly who's going places. So she's only had 3 runs. The price disparity between the front of the market and some of these horses like Ocean Road is quite remarkable. I mean, you'd have to have her winning, and maybe an each-way alternative. She makes some appeal.
Ed, you also gave her a bit of a push a few weeks back. Do you still have her as a potential prospect to take out the Oaks?
I think she's overpriced. This is touching back onto my original point. I just think there's a lot of unexposed depth in here, and we're kind of getting a little bit carried away with those at the top. I suppose we'll know in about 9 days' time, won't we? In hindsight, it'd be a wonderful thing. But I think she's 50 to 1 at the time of recording. I think that does seem big. Actual form from Lingfield's probably a bit modest, but I think you've got to kind of look at the bigger picture here. She was very slowly away. She looked a bit green. She ran with credit on the ground that was plenty soft enough. I do think she'll stay. She's had a bit of match practice at the track. I think better ground will suit her as well. And, Hugo Palmer's he's capable of pulling a rabbit out of the hat for a classic, isn't he? He did it with Galileo Gold and Covert Love as well. So I wouldn't be too shocked if she ran a big price at 50 to 1. Put it this way, I don't think she'll start anywhere near that price on the day. So, and she's going to run. So if you do fancy her, I don't think there's much harm in backing her now, because I think she could easily start 25s. I mean, the one for the race I do hope they do run, we touched upon, is Noon Star, who was runner-up in the Musadora. That Musadora has run it a cruel throughout the first 3/4 of a mile. She was far too keen. Yet to her credit, she really did knuckle down in the closing stages. She's by Frankel out of midday. She's bred to get the job, do the job. I think she'll get the trip. I just think she wants a nice race of which she can, settle. Connection seem they're going to leave it to the last minute with her in regards to whether they let her take a chance. It might be more knowing Connections. She's a bit of a slow burner, and they bring her to hand later on in the season. But at the prices at the moment, Noon Star with a run would be my selection. I do think there is mileage in Ocean Road purely on price grounds. I think 50 to 1 is too big. I don't think there's as much between Santa Barbara and those at 33 to 1 plus as the market is making out. That's my view.
Yeah, really good point, because I think what we've seen from the classic races so far, we've seen some upset results through the Guineas races, so there doesn't look to be much between the top of the market and the bottom of the market. Stephen, who's your tip at this stage for the Oaks?
I like Tiona of Roger Varians. I think she's around about 10-1. I think that's a very fair price. She'll need to settle. She certainly didn't do that in the Musidora, but there'll be a big field at Epsom. I think, is there 19 runners at the moment? Well, most of them are going to run, so they should go a right good gallop, and I can see her settling for the first time and coming through late.
The Derby is always basically an opportunity for Coolmore and Ballydoyle to strike. Aidan O'Brien's won the race numerous times, and he's got some big contenders going into the race this year, including High Definition, who was beaten in the Dante at his most recent start. Let's hear from Aidan O'Brien as to his thoughts going into the Derby.
In High Definition, what did you make of him in the Dante?
Yeah, very happy with him. Obviously, he had a very interrupted preparation. A week before, he wouldn't have been able to run with his blood picture, and just came right a couple of days before, really. We were very happy with the run. We knew he had to run if he was going to the Derby, and really couldn't have been happier, really.
You mentioned there the problems with his blood. How much of a setback at this stage of a horse's career, when you're getting them ready for a Derby, is something like that?
Listen, it's far from ideal, obviously, but we were very lucky. It came right itself without having to medicate him. So we were very lucky that happened. I really, when his blood first came out the way it was, I didn't think he would make it, and I didn't think it would come back, but it did naturally for some reason.
And he's got 2 lengths to find with Hurricane Lane on the York form. How confident would you be of reversing that?
We were very happy with him in York. Obviously we were going to ride him patiently and then kindly and gently, and that's what Ryan did. We were very happy with his run in York, and the good thing about him, I think in York he covered the last 3 furlongs quicker than any other horse in the race, so that's a very good sign for a horse like him, really.
2 from 2 as a 2-year-old Stephen, beaten at his only start so far at 3. Can he bounce back in the Derby?
I think he's another one who's an appalling price, Shane, because of all the stopwatch judges who time the final 3 furlongs at York and seem to think it has some significance for the future. I'm sure it's a fascinating hobby to have, a bit like train spotting. But I'm not. I think I was told before High Definition ran at York, I was told that his work at home had been disappointing, and he wouldn't go past the lead horse in the gallop. So that's why he drifted. He was a huge drifter. I mean, I think he looked like being an odds-on chance earlier in the week, and I think he went off 5-2 for the Dante. He was under pressure a long way out. They went a complete mad pace, which I think was the intention, by the way. Holly Doyle rode a stablemate for O'Brien, and they went sort of sprinting pace up front and collapsed. High Definition was going nowhere and did run on strongly up the straight. I don't think the form's any good at all, personally. I'll be proven wrong next Saturday, so not for me at 4-1. It's an absolutely appalling price. The winner, Hurricane Lane, wasn't going that well. He looked a stayer. He's unbeaten, so you can't crab him. There'll be more to come as his stamina is drawn out, but I have my doubts about the merits of the form. So having dissed those 2, Bolshoi Ballet was extremely impressive in Ireland. I suspect he's going to be a very short price favourite. You'll have to be against him at a thin price. Everything worked out ideally in Ireland. He quick and clear, sprinted away. He was in the right spot, won by 6 lengths. You can't knock him. The only negative for him is the price at this stage.
Bolshoi is currently 2-1, Bolshoi Ballet, and we'll talk more about him shortly. Ed, give us your view on High Definition. Are you going to be as critical as what Stephen was?
No, I wouldn't be, actually. I'm disagreeing with Stephen on this one. Whereas the Oaks, I think I'm looking at all far-flung prices to get involved. I generally think the Derby lies between the top 4 or 5 in the market. I think they're all pretty strong. I think High Definition, again, 4-1, I think is fair in the sense that I think he's only going to improve a mile and a half. Yeah, perhaps the form in the classical sense might not have been the best, but given that he'd only, failed his blood test a week earlier, I just think he came there undercooked at 70%. He will improve the trip. My biggest concern with him would be more the fact he is built like the old Chaser Denman. He's an absolute massive individual. He really is. If you see him in the paddock, he does look like a 3-mile national hunt horse. He's absolutely huge. Whether Epsom would dovetail nicely with him, we won't know. But I think there's more improvement to come from him over a mile and a half with that run under his belt. You've got to remember he was taking on a few horses there which had race fitness on their side as well, it has to be noted, and he was closing at the end. So I think he's solid. I think Hurricane Lane's solid. I think in time perhaps might be more one for the St. Leger. He looks a proper stayer in the making. I'm actually... whereas I've had my long shot goggles on for the Oaks, I generally think the favourite is the one they've all got to beat, and I think is a fair price. It makes me laugh. Beforehand, we all say, we haven't had anything come out and win a trial convincingly. This individual comes out, absolutely smashes everything to pieces in the Derrenstown, and everyone goes, he didn't beat much. Well, that's been put on the back burner because a certain horse called Matt Swinney was in fourth that day, and he was comfortably beaten. We know what he's gone on to do. Obviously, Matt Swinney, I believe, had an excuse with the vets with a lung infection after, so it may not have been his true running. But nonetheless, I think Bolshoi Ballet is the worthy favourite. Interestingly, Ryan Moore will ride, though. He's been pushed on it on a couple of interviews, and I thought Bolshoi Ballet would be the kind of default go-to. Part of me is thinking he might ride high definition. They perhaps feel he's got the potential, and he perhaps he will go above Bolshoi Ballet in time. Whether it's in a week's time or not, I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see who Ryan does ride in that. But I think it's between the front 3 or 4 in the market, and I do think, whereas I disagree with the Aidan O'Brien, Snowfall, and Santa Barbara in the Oaks, where I think they are woeful prices, I do think comparatively there's 2 very, very strong hands in the Derby personally. So Hurricane Lane, the Ballydoyle, I'm struggling to see anything at double figure prices getting involved in the Derby personally.
All right, with both Stephen and Ed giving strong push for Bolshoi Ballet, let's hear from Aidan O'Brien about his colt.
If you look at your Kazoo Derby contenders this year, starting off with the favourite Bolshoi Ballet, so impressive last time out.
Yeah, very happy with him. Everything has went well so far with him. He started off in Leopardstown in the Ballysacks, and we were very happy with him, and then went on to the Derrenstown, and we were very happy with him in that as well, and seems to be in good form since.
And those trials that he won, the Derrenstown and the Ballysacks, Galileo, High Chaparral, Fame and Glory, took that route, won both those races. Is he a horse that reminds you of any of them? Yeah,
I think he's a very well balanced horse. He seems to get the 1.25 miles very well. He quickens very well, and he's very relaxed, very off-handed. Tactically, very easy to place in a race. So I think he has a lot of their attributes as well, very happy really with him.
And some have questioned his potential stamina for 1.5 miles, and that he seems so quick over 1.25 miles. Would that be a concern for you?
I don't think so. We always thought he would get him good. Like we always thought, middle distance wouldn't be a problem to him. So obviously, you're never sure until you run over it. But we always thought he would.
At this stage, would Bolshoi Ballet be going there as the Ballydoyle #1, would you say?
Yeah, well, I think obviously we always get a little bit closer to the race, and they're running their trials, and they're all in different stages going into their trials. Like, you always try and have them in the same stage, but that doesn't always fall like that. And some of them, like, where everything had went well for them, some of them didn't go well for them, some of them were a little bit fitter than others. So they were all at different stages, really.
Great to hear from Aidan O'Brien there regarding Bolshoi Ballet, and of course earlier about high definition. Guys, let's talk about another contender for the Derby, and that is Mohafeth, who certainly looks a very promising type for trainer William Haggas. Stephen, can you make a case for him in the Derby?
Yeah, I mean, he's not done anything wrong since he returned from 5 months off, Shane. He was particularly impressive in a small field over 1.2 miles last time, turning over the odds-on favourite Secret Protector, but I do have my doubts as to whether that form's anywhere near good enough to win the Derby, to be honest. The one I like was Ed Dunlop's John Leeper, who I think we're going to touch on in a moment. He was really free for most of the race at Newmarket last time out. The form might only be modest, but I was amazed that he was able to win that race, and if he settles, I don't think he'll be too far away.
All right, Ed, can you make a case for Mohafeth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big disclaimer, the big asterisk next to this horse has been what Connection has gone on record saying: if the ground comes up soft at Epsom, he will not run. They will wait for later targets. Very ground dependent, wants top of the ground. Looking at the weather, things are going to come in his favour. So I think he's going to be a lively contender. He won head in chest last time, it has to be said. What that all adds up to, I don't quite know. I kind of agree with Stephen to an extent. It was a bit of a muddling race. I'm not quite sure the odds on favourite ran up to true potential, but nonetheless, couldn't have done it any easier. And it's definitely a horse with potential. Conditions, I think, will dictate a lot with that horse, and I just think it's a case of the quicker the ground, the better for him. So definitely one to bear in mind.
Guys, I want to go back to McSweeney just a little bit. Of course, the Irish 2000 Guineas winner. Now up to 1.5 miles for the Derby. Jim Bolger's a genius. We know that, Stephen. This horse has had a lot of experience compared to plenty of his rivals. He'll be lining up for the 9th time when he steps out in the Derby. Already a 2-time Group 1 winner. It's amazing how Bolger can just keep getting his colts through the 3-year-old season to improve and improve and improve again when he goes to each of these races.
Yeah, I think he had an excuse for his run first time out when he was well held in the Derryn stand. They found something amiss, didn't they, with him? He really was impressive in Ireland, and I think that's proper form. He didn't get a soft lead or anything. He was taken on by numerous others and kept pulling out more. I was really taken with that. Will he stay? Well, we don't know. That's a question mark. You'd have to have some doubts about it because he doesn't look short on speed, but he's certainly a fascinating runner. I wouldn't put anybody off at double figures, that's for sure.
Tactically wise, Ed, he can be bang on speed. We saw him virtually lead all of the way when winning the Irish 2000 Guineas. You would anticipate he'd probably be in the firing line from the outset in the Derby.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. Whether they try and make all or not, I wouldn't be so sure over that kind of unknown trip. But I do agree, Shane. I think he'd be ridden prominently. Just my big concern with this individual now is just the ground. I mean, yeah, he won his maiden, which he's entitled to on yielding, but all his forms come very deep ground. I mean, the meeting last weekend for the Irish Guineas was in danger of being called off at one stage. It was that soft. And if you look through a lot of his form, it's all on soft to heavy. With 24, 25 degrees all next week and, you know, the potential, the word firm appearing, I just wonder whether it'll suit him. I just think he enjoys that kind of winter ground, if you like. 1.5 miles, again, like a lot of them, you don't really know until they try. I'm not so worried about necessarily with the trip with him. It'd just be whether I just think maps are more of a like kind of flatter track, galloping and deep ground, maybe more his ballpark. But nonetheless, you've got to respect him. He's just won a classic and has to come here with major claims.
For all sentimental reasons, I think John Leeper will be a leading contender for many, including trainer Ed Dunlop. We caught up with him to get his thoughts.
John Leeper has just done 10 furlongs here at Epsom under Adam Kirby. What was Adam's feedback?
He was very happy. We actually went a mile because the ground's so soft. We brought it back 2 furlongs. I think he was very happy. He said he coped with the ground. He liked the way he picked up at the end of it, and touching wood, all okay.
And he's only had 3 runs. He's also 28th of April foal, so is it fair to say there might be a bit of improvement still to come?
He's improving already. Whether that's quick enough or good enough to be competitive in the Derby, I don't know, but he's come on a lot from his 2 runs this year, and he looks to be growing up mentally as well as physically. So I like the way he behaved today. I was particularly pleased with the way he behaved in the gallop or canter stroke gallop. He wasn't keen, he was relaxed, because Newmarket there was a little concern with the fast pace of the race that he just got a bit lit up in behind, so that pleased me. So yeah, no, today has been constructive, I think.
And you've trained Group 1 winners in most countries in the world over many years. How exciting is it to have a real live Derby contender at the stable?
I mean, the Irish are dominating the betting at the moment. Mr. Appleby's here and he may disagree with that, but, you know, we've got to improve. But I can see why he's being talked about. You know, he's a very well-bred horse. There's a lot of sentiment being named after my father, and it's very exciting. You know, we'll hopefully keep him fit and well to the race and turn up in good form.
And talk to us about the name, obviously named after your late father. When was that decided? Was it always?
Mrs. Pettino did it when he was born. It's all due to her. She asked my mother. My dad had died, and my mum approved the idea. I think my father would have been a little embarrassed and surprised, but probably quite amused if he knew about it. And she's always had a dream of having a horse run in the Derby like this, and it's all her plan. So I hope we don't let her down. He's run on the all-weather. I wouldn't want it very fast. I doubt it will get that. Look, we've got very heavy here today. I'm sure it'll be beautiful ground for everyone. I can't see there being many excuses with the ground on Derby Day after the awful weather we've had recently. So, nice ground will be fine for us.
And the track, you think, you know, it's obviously just been rounded, but do you think...
You never know. Yeah. You never know till you run in the Derby. We've gone a mile, but we've cantered for 6 and quickened up a little bit for 2. It's very different in the Derby. They've got to come up the hill and round Tattenham Corner.
And Snow Ferry, his dam, obviously... loved it around here. Do they have similar characteristics at all?
A little bit. He can be slightly feisty in the morning. She was very tough. He looks like he's tough, has a good brain, is an intelligent. But no, he's uncomplicated. But you know, she was a freak. She was a world champion. She was brilliant. He's got a long way to emulate his mother.
And how exciting is it for the team generally?
Oh, very. The team have done great. To have a horse with such a profile running the Derby is incredible, and we'll make the most of it, I can assure you.
I'm a massive fan of Ed Dunlop. Of course, he's had enormous success over the years with the likes of Ouija Board, Red Kiddo, who he brought to Australia many times, and of course, Snow Fairy, the dam of John Leeper. Well, can he make the transition, Stephen? He looks like he's a horse that's just sort of emerged out of nowhere in the past few weeks to become a prominent horse in the markets for the Derby. Do you feel he's up there to winning the race?
I think he's a very fair price at double figures. He might get bigger, in fact, because the bare form isn't good enough. But when he won that race at Newmarket, it was quite amazing, really, because he was still pulling 3 furlongs out. Everything went wrong. He's certainly not the finished article, that's for sure. He'll probably settle because they'll always go a rapid pace in the Derby. So you'll see him drop a bit. His lack of experience could be a negative, which Ed Dunlop touched on in the video there. But he's just one of those instinct horses that you sense is very, very smart. I remember him winning, I think it was on the all-weather, his second start, and he was really impressive there, quickening up, hard held to sprint clear, having been very well backed up. He could be anything. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he didn't improve past all the more established names at the front of the market.
Ed, when we talk about Ed Dunlop, I think he's without a doubt one of the great thinkers as a trainer, and he's had enormous success all around the world. I think he's won Group 1 races in 8 countries. It's quite a remarkable achievement. But I love the way that this horse just looks like he's getting better and better each and every time we see him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely a raw, unfurnished individual who is improving by racing. But the problem will be, it was a mile and a quarter last time out, and the horse was plenty keen enough. Now, I accept the view that perhaps over a mile and a half they will go a stronger gallop, but he's going to need to switch off and settle. And Epsom is a very kind of idiosyncratic track, isn't it? And if he does too much too soon at Epsom, I just cannot see him lasting home in this. That being, if he does look to have a fair amount of speed. You know, the turn of foot he showed over 10 furlongs to win at Newcastle from his penultimate start, I thought did look pretty impressive. Bred to get the job. Obviously, his dam is one of my favourite mares, Snow Fairy. Absolutely loved her. I thought she was absolutely fantastic. She just, whatever race she ran in, whatever the day, ground, weather, whatever, always ran an absolute stormer in a Group 1, and obviously had a kind of a red letter day at Epsom, didn't she? So I'm on the fence with John Leeper. I can understand the angle from a price perspective. I've just not. He's going to have to settle. He was far too keen throughout the first 3/4 of a mile, and I suppose the flip side of that is you could say, well, he's done very well to go on and win a listed contest despite being so keen in the early stages. But I just got stamina reservations about him. And the final point would be, as Dunlop touched upon, if the ground did come up pretty lively, that would be a concern for him.
All right, Ed,
we've touched upon it throughout the show, but
let me twist your arm. Well, let me twist your arm then. Who's the horse you want to be with the Derby now, just over a week out?
I'll be the favourite all day long. Bolshoi Ballet. I just think he's got the form in the book. He saw off Max Swinney convincingly. He quickened up. He looked better the further he went over 10 furlongs. Pedigree suggested get a mile and a half. I think the others in there at single figures do have solid claims, but I'm struggling to find anything at 12, 14 to 1 I want to get excited about, but I really can't. Well, a totally different view with the mares. But in this contest, yeah, I'm with Bolshoi Ballet at the moment. No exciting price, but I think he will win.
Quick word from you then, Stephen. Who do you want to be with the Derby?
Against high definition win and place, and with John Leeper.
All right, good stuff. Let's have a look at what's coming up this weekend. Of course, we've got good racing at Haydock. A couple of Group 3 races, including the Betway Pinnacle Stakes. Alba Flora and Alpinista, certainly market leaders there, and both look tremendous winning their first up runs. Caballetta's well in the market at a big price. La Luna, National Treasure's also well in the market. Oriental Mystique, well supported around that 13-2 quote. Salsada at 16-1, and Wait for the Lord at 25-1. What are we doing in the Pinnacle Stakes, Stephen?
Well, I've just noticed, Shane, that the top one comes out Alpinista. That's definitely a non-runner.
Okay.
So the race now revolves around Caballetta, who I thought was disappointing first time out. Well beaten at York. I quite like La Luna here of Henry Candy. She's a 5-year-old mare. She made a winning reappearance in the Nottinghamshire Oaks, and I thought she was impressive there. She could be named the winner a long way out. Only just won narrowly in the end, but was cantering all over them up the straight. She will not mind at all if the ground continues to dry out. It's currently soft at Haydock, but there's no way it's going to be soft. They're getting the same weather up there we've got in the south, and it'll be nearly good, I'd have thought, by Saturday afternoon. So La Luna for me, but it is a race that has cut up quite badly from the declarations.
What are you doing in the race, Ed?
I'm sitting this one out, to be honest with you. Yeah, with Alpinistas and on-runner. Alflora, I believe, for the same connections, was entered as well, who does enjoy soft ground, doesn't run. Cabaletta is a real quirky individual, not trustworthy, I think it has to be said, especially at cramped odds. I won't rattle on about this because I have no strong view. It's a race I'm not getting involved in.
All right, let's try and get something out of you for the Betway John of Gaunt Stakes over 7 furlongs, 1,400 metres. Safe Voyage, 3-1 with Bet365. Brad the Brief at 14-1. Glorious Journey quoted at 11-2. Kinross at 10-1. Njord at 9-1. River Nymph currently at around that 6-1 quote. Toro Strikes at 11-2. With Thanks at 7-2. And a big price Queen Jojo. Stephen, what are we doing in the John of Gaunt?
Yeah, not a race for big stakes. The top one's favourite, Safe Voyage. Well, he beat the Ambulance home on his return not that long ago, so it's going to be some turnaround in form for him to be back to his best. I quite like Glorious Journey here. 2 runs, Maidan and Riyadh, ran perfectly well, but his form last season was upwardly mobile. If the ground dries out to good, that's what he wants. He should go really close. He's got conditions. I thought it was a fair price, 6-1. It's a strange race. I suspect the early market might look completely different by the time they jump off for this race.
All right, Ed, you weren't keen on anything for the Pinnacle, but I think you're pretty bullish about something for the John of Gaunt.
At the prices, yeah, I believe you can get 14-1 in a couple of places about Kinross. I just think the price is all wrong. Rafe Beckett, Frankie Dettori, eye-catching jockey booking for that yard. This is an individual they've messed around with trips, tracks. They even went over Aidan. I just don't think this horse gets a yard beyond a mile. I think a mile is probably the upper end of the stamina limit for this horse. Obviously, ran over 9 furlongs at Maidan when last he ran no sort of race at all. Comes back in distance here, and I do think that could be the key for this horse. If you look through it, a lot of his good form, I do think, came over shorter distances. Ran over a mile at this track last year, hit the front 2 out, and again, the old Petrolite came on and did well to finish 4th again. I just didn't think saw out the final furlong of soft ground on that occasion. There's going to be a bit of cut in the ground, back to 7, and also realistically, Shane, you look on paper, some of the races this horse has been running, this is a feasible opportunity to win. This horse ran really well with 6th in the Guineas, not once upon a time. Safe Voyage is 3-1 favourite on old form, not on recent form. I think it's a little bit of a false price. And at 14-1, Frankie Dettori on board, down in trip, ground to suit, slight ease in grade, I think is a big price.
Great insight there. Let's have a look now at the tips of the week. And Stephen, a big pat on the back for you as we have a look at last week's results. You've been in fantastic form and you're currently now 37.5 units up since we started this, including a monster 24-unit profit last week. Frank and Stella getting the job done, and also Liberty Beach winning, causing me a little bit of grief too in that race, the Temple Stakes. But I'll forgive you for that because you're in fantastic form. Well done. Let's have a look at your tips for the coming weekend, Stephen, and are your confidence levels high?
It's competitive Saturday racing, Shane. I'm keen on Bielsa in the 145 at Haydock on Saturday. Won't mind at all if the ground dries out. Probably Handel's cutting the ground perfectly well, but has run 2 really promising races at Ayr and York this season. If you watch the run back at York, I thought did far too much too soon and then got murdered at the furlong pole. He's a very strong traveller. Let's hope the ground really dries up at Haydock, gets to being good. I think he'll go really close. He's around about 7-1. Kevin Ryan, by the way, a yard that was struggling, but has hit form this week. They've had a couple of really well-backed winners, and I think Bielsa will peak now, 3rd run back. And staying at Haydock in the 220, which is a listed sprint over 5 furlongs, I really like Ed Bethel's Moss Skill here. Now, this one is quite a prolific winner, 4 wins, a very strong traveller. Forget the run in Maidan last time. I thought he ran really well at Lingfield when 2nd on his seasonal debut when he needed the run. I like the fact they put the cheek pieces on. Drying ground will suit. I think quite a few of these up the front of the market are quite opposable, and Mossgill around about 6-1 is a sporting nap on a very difficult weekend.
All right, a couple of good price selections there from you, Stephen. Let's go to you, Ed, as we reflect on your current form last week. Overall, you're 8.5 units up for the period. You had a marginal win last week with Hookham getting the job done at a short price, and of course a Battleground being pulled out of the 2,000 guineas. So again, you're in the profit, which is good for us. Tell us about your selections for this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've already touched about Kim Ross, down in trip, ground to suit, Frankie on 14 to 1. I think it's a big price. Then I'm going to the National Hunt game again here. There's a couple of horses have been burning up my tracker. One of them be Sebastopol, who runs at Cartmel. No price at the moment. I've done the tissue for this. I've got him in around a 4 to 1 poke. I think he's got solid claims here. Since the cheek pieces have gone on, his form has really improved. He's finished second on his last 3 starts. He's been called a few names, which I think is a little bit unfair to him. I just generally think he wants a trip. I just think he looks a little bit one-paced over 2.5 miles, and that's why he just gets collared late on by horses with a bit more zip. Up to an extended 3 miles here, I think that'll really suit him. And also worth very quickly touched upon, Shane, that the Tom Lacey team had a shocking winter between like January and March. That they couldn't hit the barn door. They've really clicked all of a sudden. They've been operating around a 25% strike rate for May. So I think there's big claims of him. And then also over jumps Imperial Acolyte for Nigel Twiston-Davies at Foss Lass. He's an individual who loves soft ground. It's always soft in Wales, even if it's 28 degrees outside. So he's going to get his ground. Not a natural over fences, I don't think it has to be said. And I don't think he enjoyed coming back to 2 miles last time out. He's back to 2.5. He's a previous course of distance winner over hurdles on soft ground. I think he'll enjoy reverting to the smaller obstacles. Again, no prices yet. I've done the tissue. I've got him in at around a 9 to 2 poke. So I'm hoping we'll get a good run for our money with those with conditions to suit.
Good stuff. Now, as we have a look at my selections, I'm in wretched form at the moment. I'm down 14.5 units since we started, including losing 3 last week. Humidor was horrible in the Doomben Cup. He's now been retired, which is probably a good thing. The Learjet, of course, no result for us in the Sandy Lane. So we have a look at the other selections, because I had 4 selections last week. Lady in France ran a bottler. I thought she was going to win there in the Temple Stakes, but Stephen was too good for me. And, of course, Love, which was my main sort of selection for the weekend, was pulled out of the Tattersalls Gold Cup. I'm desperate for a winner this week because I've got a really important dinner booking on Saturday night at an expensive restaurant. I need to cover things. So let's have a look at where I'm focused on. I'm sticking to Australia. I found a horse that I think is going to run a massive race in the Queensland Derby. A New Zealand galloper by the name of He's a Shocker. Currently getting around 25 to 1 each way. He's only had 3 career starts, including winning impressively last time out. I think he should be half that quote, so I'm happy to back him. And just recapping the other selection that I had for the weekend was King's Lynn. It's had a couple of runs under its belt this campaign. Sheen Murphy, I think, from memory, takes the ride. You're getting around 8 to 1 each way with Coral in the Achilles Stakes. I'm happy to side with that, having 3 units each way. But they're my selections. I'm desperate for a good result this week because, as I said, guys, I'll be starving Saturday night unless that happens. Stephen, what are you looking forward to the most this weekend?
Well, hopefully drying ground at Haydock and Moskill getting back on track in the 220.
Good stuff, and good luck to you. And Ed, your thoughts for the weekend ahead? What are you looking forward to the most?
Yeah, I'm hoping a few of my National Hunt tracker horses come good, it has to be said. But very quick though, Shane, you tipped the Learjet last week, who raced the ambulance home in last. I actually think he's 50 to 1 to win the Commonwealth Cup. I think you can get it all back. You can get 10 restaurants in Denmark for that type of money when he wins at Royal Ascot. The ground, it was absolutely bottomless. It was all wrong. He never went a yard. He's a sprinter, 6 furlongs Ascot, 50 to 1. If you could get good to firm ground in 3 weeks' time, I think he's a major player for a previous Royal Ascot winner.
One of the great follies of my life is that it doesn't take much convincing for me, so I think I'll follow you in quite readily there. Thanks for that, Ed. Good luck to you this weekend. It's great to catch up with both Stephen Harris and Ed Quigley with their thoughts. We'll be back next week with, of course, a continued look at the big meetings coming from Epsom on Friday and Saturday with the Oaks and the Derby. Make sure you head to irishracing.com for all the latest news, race cards, tips and betting odds for racing in the UK and Ireland. And, of course, bettingexpert.com with Stephen Harris's daily tips. He's been in fantastic form, including on this show, and let's hope that run continues. Hope you've enjoyed today's edition of Jump to It. We'll see you again next week.